He needed sin to be real. Episode 2 does not introduce a new illusion. It deepens the one already accepted. The structure is no longer forming, it is stabilizing. The roles are no longer being suggested, they are being lived. And at the center of it all stands a man whose authority depends on one fragile idea: that something has gone wrong in the soul. Because if nothing has gone wrong, there is nothing to fix. And if there is nothing to fix, there is no need for a prophet. That is the hidden engine behind everything in this episode. Sin must be real. Guilt must be real. Shame must be real. Otherwise, the entire system collapses under its own weight. Christine moves deeper into the world, believing she is stepping in to help. The role of savior begins to form quietly, almost invisibly. A thought arises. These people are in danger. And from that thought, a mission is born. A burden is accepted. A responsibility is claimed. But no one ever stopped to ask, who assigned that role? Because the ego does not only create tyrants, it creates rescuers. It needs both sides to keep the story alive. One to dominate, and one to oppose. Both built on the same belief that something real has been harmed. The sheriff echoes it in softer language. It hurts a gentle heart. A sincere statement, but rooted in the same assumption: that something real has been violated. That innocence has been damaged. But harm has occurred at a level that truth itself could not withstand. But if there is no sin, what exactly has been hurt? A shadow cannot be wounded. An illusion cannot be broken. Only belief gives it weight. And belief is everywhere in this episode. It is in the girls who say, "I have to have him." Not want, not choose. Have. Possess. As if salvation was something to cling to in form. As if heaven could be accessed through a body. As if God required a middleman. That line alone exposes the entire structure. This is not devotion. It is dependency dressed up as holiness. It is fear wearing the language of love. It is the mind convinced that without him, it is lost. And Sam knows exactly how to maintain that belief. He does not rely on truth. He relies on reinforcement. Hours of teachings, endless classes, talk of destiny, purpose, greatness, and divine selection. Goals that stretch beyond reality, ruling nations, meeting queens, building kingdoms. Not random delusion, but strategic inflation. Because the bigger the vision, the less anyone questions the foundation. It becomes too grand to challenge, too sacred to doubt, too important to examine closely. And beneath it all, the same quiet demand remains. Obey. Submit. Trust. Do not question. Because questioning threatens the entire illusion. The system depends on obedience more than truth. That is why one of the most revealing admissions comes from within the structure itself. We groomed our girls for this. That is not just a statement about a community. It is a statement about the ego. The ego grooms the mind to distrust itself. It teaches that authority is outside. It teaches that worth must be earned. It teaches that suffering is noble. It teaches that confusion is spiritual. And once that conditioning is in place, a false prophet does not need to build anything. He simply occupies the role that has already been prepared. And from there, the illusion sustains itself. Even the world outside struggles to respond. Christine brings evidence, recordings,
confessions, details that should shatter the illusion immediately. And yet, delay, procedure, hesitation. The world asks for more proof while the suffering is already visible. Faces in the background, broken, silent, exhausted. But still, not enough. The ego always needs one more piece before it admits what is obvious, because acknowledging it would mean confronting the belief system underneath it, and that is far more uncomfortable than waiting. Meanwhile, Sam continues without resistance. He speaks openly. He records himself. He expands the narrative because he believes he is untouchable. And in a sense, he is. Not because he is powerful, but because the belief that sustains him has not been questioned deeply enough. He has covered everything, not through brilliance, but through belief. Belief in authority, belief in hierarchy, belief in divine exception. Belief that what he does can be made sacred if it is framed correctly. That is the real camouflage, not secrecy, but justification.
Call it holy, and people will hesitate to challenge it. Call it divine, and people will doubt their own instincts. Call it obedience, and people will override their own alarm. And that is exactly what happens here. Girls who resist eventually submit. Not because it becomes right, but because they are taught that resistance is wrong. Mothers become shields. Language becomes protection. Reality becomes negotiable. And the system continues. Until something begins to shift. Not in the courts, not in the headlines, but in the quietest place. Recognition. Julia starts finding reasons to come around. Small, almost invisible movements. Lingering. Returning. Creating space where truth might be spoken. That is how illusion begins to crack. Not with force, but with willingness. A willingness to question what has been accepted. A willingness to see what has been avoided. And when that moment comes, Christine does something that cuts through the performance. She does not argue. She does not accuse. She reveals. She tells her own story of being deceived, of following a false prophet, of surrendering judgment, of confusing obedience with truth. And in that moment, the illusion is no longer abstract. It becomes recognizable, because deception always looks different from the outside, until it is seen from within. And once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. That is the real turning point of episode 2. Not the investigation, not the evidence, but the exposure of the pattern. A pattern that says suffering leads to salvation. A pattern that says obedience leads to worth. A pattern that says fear is part of holiness. A pattern that says the body can be used in the name of God. And Lesson 101 quietly dismantles all of it. God's will for me is perfect happiness, not delayed happiness, not conditional happiness, not earned happiness. Perfect happiness, which means anything built on fear cannot be of God. Anything built on coercion cannot be of God. Anything that requires confusion, shame, or violation cannot be of God. And if there is no sin, then there is nothing to punish, nothing to atone for, nothing to earn back. Which means the entire foundation of the false prophet disappears instantly. Because he cannot exist without guilt. He cannot lead without fear. He cannot promise without lack. He cannot rule without the belief that people are broken. Take that away, and there is no authority left. Only a man speaking into a system that no longer believes him. That is the deeper exposure of episode 2. Not just the man,
but the mechanism. Not just the crime, but the belief that made the crime appear meaningful. And as the cracks begin to form, one question remains underneath it all. If the entire system depended on guilt being real, what happens the moment guilt is no longer believed?